Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 131 of Retro Power Uncut. And we're going to start again in the fabrication shop because people seem to like that format, and it probably does make a lot more sense really. So we're going to start with Mark 1 Escort, Project Utah. I've lost my voice, talking too much. So yeah, Sam's been on with this week, doing a lot of the slightly less photogenic but extremely necessary jobs that all queue up at the end of a project like this, at the end of the metalwork stage, with all the little necessary bits that need ticking off. So on that list are things like he is now finished fabricating the mounting pads for the prop shaft centre bearing mount and got those welded into the shell. He's fabricated, well he's not, he's welded into position. There are two bosses in the floor just to the rear of the prop shaft crossmember mount that mount will mount, it's not made yet, a nylon skid for the handbrake cable outers to run through to keep them in position and stop them rubbing on the floor. We're putting a little nylon skid that goes onto two lugs with two countersunk bolts to hold that on. And he's made the mounts for that and got them welded into the floor, so they're in now. I'm just going to hold on a minute because he's making a little, there we go, he's in. He's mounting the washer tank. We've got if people maybe remember from previous episodes that we're using a washer tank built into a footrest, which is something we've done before. Which is mounting in the passenger footwell, and that sits on bosses bolted through the floor, and there are holes in the floor for that. He's put those holes into the floor for that. He's currently making a recess in the front offside inner front panel to a pressed recess, which is where the pipework goes through for the air conditioning condenser. So that's what he's doing at the moment, is pressing that recess into that front panel so that so he can then, he'll press that recess. He's basically cut a hole, put a press tool through it, which we'll be able to see now, but I won't try and do that, it'll only get complicated. Basically, we've made a press tool, which goes either side of the front panel, which is pulled up by a hydraulic cylinder, which is normally used as a knockout punch. So he's made a hole in the panel, put the press tool through either side, put the hydraulic pull ram through, and now he's pumping that up. That's going to press an indentation into the panel. Once that indentation's pressed in, he'll take the press tool out, then cut out that shape, cut out round the indented shape, and that'll give a nice little recess in that panel where the pipework's going to go through. So that's what he's working on at the moment. He's also fabricated the rear, or finished fabricating the innermost mount for the HVAC unit behind the dash. That's all in now. Refitted the steering column, trial fitted all of that, and made sure all that fitted. And then tack welded in place the lower, the rotating seal mount. We talked about it last time. There was a bit of an issue with alignment. That's all sorted now. And he has also done something else that I've forgotten. Door speakers, that's what I was going to say. He's also made the door speaker mount, well, the door speaker mounts were made. He's mounted those up, got them in position, and then TIG welded those into the door inner structures, got them all fitted, so they're all done. And then we will be trial fitting the fuel tank. I don't think he's done that yet. The fuel tank's going to be trial fitted, and the breather, the tank breather hole put through the floor for the fuel tank, that'll be got into place. I think we keep refining the job list, but the job list's getting pretty short now. It's getting very, very close to the tail end of all the metalwork on this, and then it's going to be onto the wheel arches, really. That's the next stage. So to that end, we'll do that now. I'm going to walk over there now, pick it up again. I know we keep showing a little bit each week, but we'll show another little bit. It's a different bit each time. I'm going to get this wrong. This is another rear, and I think that is which way around is it? That's the front of the rear there. So that's a front half. So this will be the near side forward half, and the near side rear wheel arch extension that Tom's working on here. Same deal as previous episodes, so it's kind of more of the same. He's doing the shaping work on that. So again, hammer, chaser, chasing the material around, I've kind of skirted over it. I think there were some comments about skirting over that a little bit. I could go into a lot of detail. It might be better done after the project. If there's enough interest, people pipe up. If you want us to do something especially on how this is done from start to finish, rather than picking it up in little dribs and drabs on the uncut episodes, comment. If there's enough people comment saying we'd like to see how this was done from start to finish, we'll do a little special on how we've done this from start to finish, from the body shell, scan, CAD work, machining the tools, making the blanks, shaping the pieces, grafting them into the car, planishing the welds out, through to doing the final filler work and prep for paint. If you want to see it all the way through, comment, we'll have a look into doing that. At the moment, Tom's doing the shaping, and you can see the problems stroke nature of the job that he's dealing with around here, where we have the tucks that he's created by virtue of closing this material down over the die, the tucks that have been created that he's then flattening out, shrinking the material by flattening these tucks out, and that's what's going on there. I can try and explain it in more detail, but there's not a lot more to explain. There's basically a level of skill involved in manipulating the chase as such that none of these fold over on themselves. He actually had one just go over on itself this morning, but only very slightly, and he's managed to planish that right down, and then he's just going to fuse weld over it with the TIG to get rid of it. It won't really be a problem. The trick is to hammer all these down onto themselves in such a way that they don't fold over on themselves, but they shrink down. The metal thickens by virtue of it being contained and having no other direction to travel in other than by thickening itself and closing in on itself. And that's exactly what he's doing there at the moment, is closing that material down so that it thickens, and we can lose the area of material into thickness to change the shape. There was a comment, I think 2 weeks ago, saying what happens in a press tool. How does a press tool shrink and stretch the material? Yes, it does. That's exactly how a press tool works. And a press tool isn't just a nice uniform gap between two tools that just closes and goes, oh, there's a part finished. The material is uniformly stretched and shrunk within a press tool simultaneously as the press closes. And it's why the tonnage to close a press tool is enormous, and it's why the tool has to be incredibly strong. I think there was also a comment about, well, why not make press tools and just press these arches out? The problem with just pressing these arches out is that this tool would need to be machined in steel, and probably hardened steel at that, to do this accurately enough for a finished outer panel. The problem with epoxy tool just won't be hard enough to do all that movement of material all in one hit. And the other problem is that press tools need to be tuned a lot. You can't just just press once and go, yeah, that's good, first hit, perfect. It won't be. There'll be an enormous amount of tuning of press tools. Now, there's software to do that these days, but even so, there's a lot of tuning work involved to get a press tool to generate a panel that's fit for installation on the outside of a car. With sort of an A-class surface finish, it's just not a very straightforward thing. So that's the reason why most prototype vehicle panels in steel or aluminium are still formed using a hammer over a piece of epoxy board. That is a pretty common system for making prototype panels in the main automotive world. So that's where we're at on Project Kuma wheel arches. We're going to reverse over, Jamie, try not to fall over, to Project Churchill. I'm going to just come over here because I left a little prop here, which Stu has been working on a couple of little areas on this. Again, all detail work going on at the moment, so not like super photogenic, whoa, here's a new outer body on something. He's been working on the seatbelt inertia reel mounts on the sills, which are quite a nicely shaped little piece that he's done that caps onto the rear end of the sill. That's pretty structural and solid, obviously, needs to be. It's carrying a seatbelt load. He's made those and got them welded onto the inner sills both sides. And then he's moved on to making the speaker mountings that are needed to go onto the inner quarter panels, of which that is an example, which he's made using a Pullmax tool to put the step in. I think he's used a fluting tool, but he's only used half of it so that it's put this step onto the panel. And I think he's actually just free-handed these, he said, rather than using a guide. I think he's just free-handed these recesses on the Pullmax, which is pretty skillful because it's very hard and there's a couple of little wobbles. but it's pretty skillful. It's very, very hard to freehand on the pull max. On the bead roller, it's a lot easier, but we don't have a step die to make that size step for the bead roller. Bead roller is dead easy to, well, relatively easy to freehand. The pull max is incredibly difficult because it's vibrating. You tend to sort of leap all over the place while you're doing it. So Stu's done a very nice job of that. But just to anybody that was in any doubt whether Stu was skillful, it's just one of those things. He just goes, oh, yeah, I'll just freehand that. That's Stu through and through, really. So he's made a pair of those. The other one's in the car installed already. I think his next job was getting this one installed, and then various other jobs. I think he's been putting the seats in and out. I know he's had the seats in and out of the car a number of times, refining the fit of the seat runners, because I think there's been a stack up of various difficulties with the revised seat runners that he's done. I think he's about got all that finished off now, so that's all good. And I know he's finished off the front oil cooler mounts as well. We talked about that he'd started doing those last week. He's finished those off, and I think certainly he was talking to me earlier in the week about the mounting method for the mesh grill, so I think he's been working out a system for fitting that as well. I think that pretty much rounds up where we're at with Churchill. I can't remember whether we covered last week. I think we had covered last week. He's been making this bracket for the dryer, the aircon dryer. I think we've already covered that, but he's about got that finished off now as well. So that's where we're at with that. Moving over here, I think last week I just mentioned that these fixtures had rolled up from Body Shop Solutions. Well, now they're back on the pallet because they're ready to go. I've actually forgotten two of them. They're still on here, so I need to take them off as soon as I finish doing this video, because that's booked for collection to go back to Body Shop Solutions. The INTEGRA body shell is now completely fixtured down to the jig. The strut tower mounts are coming out. They're actually not being left on. All the other mountings are now fabricated. I haven't copied that fixture set, so that might be upset by that. I haven't done it anyway because we don't want to copy that fixture set. Weirdly, the mechanicals in fixture set from Select for this body is not very good, in my opinion. Sorry, Select. It doesn't actually clamp the body down very well in the places I want to clamp it down. So I've actually made a totally different fixture set. I've fixtured the car to the jig using the Select setup, so that I know it's all straight, I know it's all true to the jig, and I know everything's in the right places. I've done all that, and then I've made new fixtures that pick up off different places. These two pick up off the engine mounts. That is where that is a point that was picked up by the original Select fixtures. However, the next set back, which are under there, I've done to pick up under the subframe and bolt through the subframe and into the floor. The original set wasn't very good in that area, so I've redone that in a different way. That's now a lot stronger. That picks up off there. And then at the back, I've done mounts that pick up off the rear anti-roll bar mounts, so that I can get the, I've forgotten the names of all the different suspension parts, but the transverse arms that hold the rear struts on, I've forgotten what they're called now. But anyway, the transverse suspension links can be fitted in and out without touching the rear fixtures. And then I've done some fixtures further forward which pick up off the main trailing link mounts in a slightly different way to the original fixtures, just again so that I can get all suspension on and off the car with nothing getting in the way. The only annoyance is that these pick up, the front mounts pick up off the engine mounts, which means I can't get the engine in and out with it fixtured like this. However, by the point I need to put the engine in and out, I can pick up off other points then, because the rest of the car will be solid by that point. The other key bit you may have noticed here is there's a bit of it missing. I've this morning cut the quarters of the roof off, got them out of the way. We're going to take the rear panel off in a little bit. I'll finish taking that off as well. Cut the quarters off. I believe they are going to, and I've forgotten the chap's name, so forgive me, whatever your name is. I think it's Tim, chap who is part of the Honda UK club, car club, and I believe they are investigating getting repair panels made for quarter panels. And he contacted me very nicely asking what we were doing with the quarters and if they might be available. So we said yes, given that it's a good cause and we can't really, they're not fit to sell or anything like that, so I'm not really taking money away from my customer on that basis. I've said to him if he can pick them up, then he can have them, and hopefully they'll go on to help other Integras actually have replacement quarter panels made. So that's what's happening to the quarter panels from the car. And then, yeah, progressing with peeling it, basically. The outer sill structures have got to come off, the inner wheel arches have got to be trimmed back, rear panel's got to go, the boot floor's got to be cut back, top of the scuttle panel here with the screen vent in it's got to go, top of the A-post have got to go, the outer reinforcers to the inner wings have got to go. And a lot of that has been done on based on a mixture of two things: tape measure and the further scan work that George has done on the Allegro shell. George has been busy scanning the inner structure of the front of the Allegro so that he can do me a meshing of the Allegro outer shell structure onto the Integra floor pan, particularly in this area, the A-post area, because that's the most complex area to resolve on the body as it is. Most of the rest of it we've got a pretty straightforward plan on, but that area is slightly complicated, and he's now put the two together so that he can generate me some profiles which are going to give me the alignments between the Allegro A-pillar and the Honda bulkhead. So that's the plan there. That's all falling into place quite well, so you'll be able to see that progress as we go. Front panel's got to come off actually as well. It's another bit that's got to come off. But yeah, watch this space on this one. It's going to develop, as these things do, initially fairly rapidly, and then obviously as we get through, the visual pace will slow, because you know, the progress further down the line, the detail work is a lot more awkward and difficult and time consuming than the initial just chop bits off and stick major bits on. So yeah, the fixturing, we've basically this week achieved fixturing it, an initial panel removal, and getting in the background the CAD and scan work a lot closer to what we actually need to be able to back up doing the engineering work on putting the body shell together. So that's where we're at on that one. And moving swiftly on into body prep. The guys are on with Project 1 Escort. There's been a bit of toing and froing on it. The initial, they've got that into polyester. I've done the initial filler work on the bulk of the shell. We've had some toing and froing on the front wings, in that there was an interference between the tyres on lock at full suspension droop and the bottom edge of the front wings, because the caster was not set quite how we wanted it at the point when the initial clearance checks were done on the wings. I think there was a bit of a miscommunication and whatever, and that didn't get checked. It's now been checked, but we have had to modify the lower corner of both front wings a little bit to gain a bit more wheel clearance there. So the wings have been on and off quite a bit, and there's been quite a lot of work putting the wheels on and off the car and double checking. We wanted to double check everything again anyway, just because it's best to be done. If it happens, if you find a problem once the car's painted, it's an absolute disaster. So it needs to be completely checked. The wings have got to be welded on. Before they're welded on, they've got to be raptured, and the inner wings have got to be raptured. And before we did that, we wanted to make sure that there were no further problems before committing to that point. So I think we're about at that point of being able to get them raptured now. The guys are just taking the opportunity to get on with some of the blocking work before breaking anything else down and getting more paint put onto things, getting raptor put onto things. And I think we're getting towards the stages of being able to get those raptured, get the inner wings raptured, and get the outer wings actually welded on and fixed for the final time, where they'll stop moving around. Every time you put them on and off, they appear to be in a completely different position, and it gets a bit wearing after a while. But yeah, I think we're getting close to that stage. You see, they've got the door seals on. You got door? Yeah, got door seals on. So they're looking at getting the. Yeah, I'm not imagining. I thought I was seeing things then for a minute. Got door seals on, set to get the doors shut against seals, so we can see exactly how that tips the door in the aperture and exactly how that alters the gaps, exactly how that fouls everything up as it always does. So we can work around that. But yeah, things are progressing pretty damn rapidly on this. So be able to watch things progress pretty quickly. So I think that pretty much sums up where we're at this side. I will hand over to Cal in just 1 second. Prior to that, I'm going to answer a couple of questions. I kind of picked up on a couple of things earlier on. I'm just going to look on here because there were two that I'd also picked up on that I wanted to mention. One was from a YouTube user, Harold Hanelius, who said, "Have you been contemplating using an air hammer to form the arches?" Stop right there, Jarkle. Yes, we have been contemplating using an air hammer. Here it is. It isn't the answer to everything though. It speeds up a few areas of the job, but the problem is it's very, very difficult to control the tucks in the material when using an air hammer. They tend to go in the direction you don't want them to move in, and there's a surprising amount of directional adjustment required on the hits on the nylon chasers to actually cause the material to gather and shrink. You do need to be quite directional with the hits. So it's not the answer to everything. You can bulk move material quite quickly with this. What you can't do is do the precision work you need when you're doing the shrinking, which is the bulk of the time-consuming part of the job. So yeah, it might save you a few hand hits, but not very many, if I'm totally honest. But yes, we do have an air hammer with a nylon chaser in it, because we kind of already thought of that one. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. And the other one was the question over the zinc metal spray. Somebody, Tim Hooper, had said, ask regarding the zinc metal spray, how it stands up under the bodywork. See a lot of bare metal where the guys are sanding. Does it get sanded off, and therefore what protects the body thereafter? Rewinding slightly, yeah, the zinc metal spray addressing the zinc metal spray on the underbody. No, it doesn't all get sanded off. You would have to try particularly hard to sand it all off with normal sanding tools as opposed to a grinder. Yeah, you'd be able to grind it off, but in terms of sanding, even with a DA or by hand, you're not going to remove all the zinc that way. And in terms of how it stands up under the car, we've got some real-world samples that we did where we applied the bare minimum zinc spray that really is possible using our Metco flame spray gun to a blasted sample. We then put some epoxy primer and Raptor over those samples, then scribed them through to the bare metal, standard salt spray test, where they're scribed through to the base steel, and put in a salt spray test cabinet. And they were then put on test, and they were taken off test at the test house's sort of behest at 3,000 hours, or just over 3,000 hours salt spray with 0 red corrosion. So at that point, their advice was, well, there's no point testing them further. That's going to outlive the car's owner at that point, basically, in terms of real world. So yes, we don't know what the ultimate endurance of that coating would be, but certainly longer than you're going to own the car. That's really the answer to that. I mean, obviously, not every surface is protected by that, because we can't use that coating, or we certainly don't want to try and use that coating on the upper external A-surface painted surfaces. But they're not normally the parts of the car that corrode away. It's normally the underbody, and the underbody is protected to a standard that is certainly far in excess of any production car. So yeah, we're happy with it. But in terms of exactly how much gets sanded off, very little through the body process. So at that point, I'll hand over to Cal in the assembly shop.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nat. I'm going to start with a coffee, and I should remind people that our very own blend of coffee is available in our shop, courtesy of Roundstone Coffee, who also keep our machine stocked, so very much appreciated. I've got a bit of, I just have got a random piece of blue roll stuck to my finger. I'll deal with that swiftly. Right, it's been a pretty busy week actually. There's tons coming and going at the minute, I guess, because it's spring and everybody's visualising use of their cars in the good weather. Everybody wants to give them a bit of a once-over, so we've got a sequence of service jobs coming through, which started this week with... Yes, I know. You've got Scott to blame for that. Scott did what he always does. He bought a McDonald's for some people, but not everyone. We can include that on the video, so he's publicly shamed. Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll start with Kaiser, which is about to go. You'll probably realise a few months ago we did the total revision on the dash, and it's basically just been in storage. So that's now going to go back over to the storage place near where the owner lives. So he's got access to it for the good weather. And in this empty space over here, Utah popped in. So that was yesterday. This week has just condensed down into nothing, but yes, it was yesterday. Utah popped up here to basically have a check over, an MOT. But it was, yeah, all absolutely fantastic. So spent a couple of hours with the owner. went down to the MOT place with him. He likes to be involved, so we kind of went over the underside of the car. He came down into the pit and had a look over it with us, so we could look over everything together. And then while it was being MOT'd, I gave him a little tour of a local business, which is a pretty cool place, Roger Clark Motorsport, the Subaru specialists, very well known for the gobstopper time attack cars. I'm kind of hoping that, although they haven't had their invite yet, I'm hoping they get invited to run Gobstopper 3 at this year's Festival of Speed, because I've got a sneaking suspicion it's capable of being the fastest car up the hill. So anyway, off on an aside, Utah was here, happy chap, gone back home, all good. And then on the subject of cars in for service, just over here, very familiar car, Project Vader. We've had that in for fluid change, so we've done transmission oil change, engine oil change, general check over again on the underside, making sure everything was still tight, which it was actually. I don't think there was any issues there. And fitment of an intercom system. So actually, those who have watched the Johnny Smith video about this car will probably have noticed it's quite loud. It's quite difficult to hear what he's saying in that video. And in real life in the car, it's very difficult to hear what your passenger is saying. The combination of it being totally stripped out, straight cut gearbox, and a pretty noisy exhaust and induction means it's a pretty intense place to be. So we've done a Stilo intercom system in there. So driver and passenger can chat in relative comfort, and it also incorporates a Bluetooth phone connection, so the driver can also answer calls on his headset, so they can hear what people are saying, because you've got absolutely no chance of hearing your phone in there. But yeah, otherwise all good. So that is going back, I think it will be tomorrow. So that is one car, 2 cars arrived and 3 going. The Morris, actually this week, the Morris really has been waiting for good weather, and actually looking out the window, it's looking quite reasonable today. But it's essentially just waiting for some decent weather, because I don't want to be taking them out on wet roads, just because it's incredibly difficult to clean all of that road spray back off everything. So just waiting for testing on that. Camaro, good few avenues of progress on this one this week. I think last week we saw Scott midway through his fabrication of the intake pipe, and explained some details about that. He finished welding that up last week, so that's all done and ready for paint on that. We've been doing the dynamat, so Rich has dynamatted all of the interior, and also on the interior, John has been, actually no, Scott in the end has been working on the glove box insert / PDM mounting area. So when you pull the glove box open, there's going to be an aluminium fabricated mounting piece in there, which will eventually be flocked or upholstered, and that's going to mount the 2 ECU Master PDMs that are going in this. So he's been on with the fabrication of that. There was something else, screen wash jets. So John has been working on the screen wash jets. We've used essentially standard original jets, but they normally come out under the scuttle and go into the engine bay, and we want to keep all the pipe work hidden away. But we were able to just rebend them, so they go under the outer scuttle panel, and then they disappear down into the scuttle area before they pop out under there, and then the pipe work will be routed across the scuttle to the screen wash on the other side. And eventually in that recess over there, which mimics this one, we're going to have an exact replica of this brake master cylinder piece on that side, and there will be 2 fill ports in there. One will be the screen wash, and the other one will be the clutch master cylinder hydraulic feed. So yeah, reasonable plan in place there. We're just waiting for the radiator to be fabricated, and that's kind of the cornerstone to everything going together. Once we've got that radiator in, which incorporates the power steering reservoir as well, we can put the intake pipe in for the final time. We can plumb the AC, plumb the oil, plumb the coolant, all of which we've got the pipe work ready to do. And that buttons up that apart from the wiring then. And as another random little detail, also out of the corner of my eye, I see the rear bumper is fitted. After a bit of to and fro thought on this with the owner, we eventually decided to go no bumper on the front, but standard bumper on the back. And we were waiting for the brackets to come back from Xylan coating to fit the rear bumper, but they're back, so that's now on. If I move over here, E-Type, there was a few jobs on this that also tied in with that Xylan plating batch coming back. I'll scoot around this side. Finishing off the fuel plumbing. was one of the things. So we've got the ATEC hard lines running under the car, and then they go to a bracket where they intersect via bulkhead fittings from hard line to flexi line, and that was one of the things, that bracket was one of the things that it was a way of having Xylem coating done on it. And then we'll be running flexi lines from there to the fuel pressure regulator, and at the moment I think Adam's literally right in the process of doing the plumbing to the carbs slash throttle bodies. They're actually generally fuel injection throttle bodies that look like Weber DCOE carbs. So we're trying to come up with a really nice way of doing the fuel plumbing to them that looks as neat as possible, neater than the original Weber carb plumbing would have tended to be, where they have those banjos with kind of rubber link pipes between them. So again, we've gone with ATEC on the hose and fittings, ATEC hard line, little banjos with T-pieces, and then those hard lines are going to run all the way across the throttle bodies down underneath, and then they'll join underneath another mounting plate with bulkhead fittings, where they'll then transform to, I can't get my words out today. They'll then transition to flexi lines to go to the regulator and back to the plate for the return line. And speaking of fuel system, we got the fuel pump mount back from machining. So that was Andy, Concept 303, who did the machining on that. This is the plate you've seen us prototyping before, which will hold a Bosch 044 pump submersed in the tank, and it incorporates the feed and return fittings to it. And that's looking really neat. I don't know if that's in at the minute. Yes, it is. But the plumbing is going to be super neat there. So we've got one side it comes out 45-degree fitting straight to the bulkhead fitting through the back of the axle tunnel, if you like, and then a 45 this side, which will run along to a bulkhead fitting the opposite side here. So there you feed and return, and then there's two additional holes in that plate, which are the studs, which will be mounted in a little nylon isolating washer that transmit the electrical connections to the fuel pump inside, and then actually the big round remaining one is just a bung so you can easily take that out and check anything, dip the tank if you want to through that. And I think James has also now got a bung that he's machined for the underside, which is going to mount the sort of anti-surge pot inside. So that's all looking good. I'm trying to think what else they've been on with on this. We've been looking at fabricating the gearbox cross member. I think we mentioned last week that although we got a complete gearbox conversion kit for this, there was a few issues. The prop was the wrong length, which may have just been a mistake. The gearbox cross member doesn't fit, so we're remaking our own version of that. And then the bell housing is quite tight on the tunnel, so we're going to have the engine and box out of this again, but we wanted to check everything else fit-wise while we had the opportunity to, so there's no chance the engine has to come out again. Hence we're fitting up all the things like the throttle bodies, plumbing the fuel, getting the alternator mounted in there. We've also done the air connections for the idle air control valve, so we've got a little port on the bottom of each runner. They all tee together, and then that pipe goes to I think it's possibly a Ford Focus idle air control valve, which we've done a little machine bracket to mount on the side of the block, which will do the idle control. On cars like this, you can do ignition with aftermarket management. We can do ignition-based idle control, but you've only got so far you can control the idle with, and you tend to find when you're really trying to drop the idle down, you retard the ignition so much you get very hot exhaust temperatures. So it's when you're trying to control quite a wide range of idle, which you will get on a car that's got air conditioning like this, it's better to have either electronically actuated throttle or an actual air valve that bleeds in additional air to raise the idle. And then you do the ECU mapping accordingly, so when the ECU is allowing more idle air in, it also ups the fueling to compensate. So yeah, that's what we're doing on that. So we're just trying to get everything together, so once we have dropped the engine out to sort the transmission problem, we can then have it in for the final time. Land Cruiser, James has been working on the fuel rails. It's just about there with them actually. So this is an extrusion you can buy. It's a kind of an aluminium extrusion, which is just a solid block along the bottom, and it just has one continuous round bore through the whole length. So what we do is cut that to length, machine the injector O-ring detail in the bottom, so where the injectors are going to sit into the bottom of the rail, we machine that detail in. Typically then tap the ends for where the fuel connections fit, as it is on this rail, because it's very tight on the ends. We're doing the link pipe and one of the, it's either the feed or the return on the inside face, and so the ends of those rails will just have threaded bungs put into them. So basically he's been drilling and tapping all of the unions for that, the injector detail, and then he's just making the brackets that will bolt those rails to the manifold. And then once he's done that, the final job will be the drill and tap into the sort of chunky solid part at the bottom of that rail, where the rails will bolt to the actual brackets that hold them on. So nearly there with that, and then there's a whole bunch of anodising to go away then. So the rails, the manifold, and the cam cover, no, maybe not. I think there was a number of items that needed to go for anodising anyway, and then once they're back, all that lot can go on, and we'll be into testing the fuel system on this then. So that is good. Was there anything else? I don't think there's anything else to cover in here. So on that note, I feel like there is, but we'll see you next week. Was there anything else?